Infrastructure attracts first-class jobs. And right now, our investments in transportation are lagging the rest of the world. If Washington were working the way it's supposed to, Congress would be fixing that. We'd be investing in the things that help America bring more good jobs to our shores. Instead, here's what's going on in Washington. There's something called the Highway Trust Fund. I suspect this crew is familiar with it. It helps states support transportation projects. If Congress fails to fund it, it runs out of money. That could put nearly 700,000 jobs at risk, including more than 17,000 right here in Virginia. More than 100,000 active projects across the country. Projects where workers, as we speak, are paving roads and rebuilding bridges and modernizing our transit system. Those projects would be slowed or stopped. And some states have already had to put some projects on hold because they don't trust Congress to get its act together.
As often happens in Washington, the sexier items get all the media play and always are the focal point for political press conferences. It's what's under the surface that often comes back to bite the government and then the taxpayers when we least expect it. And that's the best place to start with the issue of roads you drive on every day. Those roads that are falling apart faster than the ideas for an upbeat musical rendition of Game of Thrones. That and a few more cautionary tales as we welcome into MidPoint former head of the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, a gentleman who helped shape policies pertaining to transportation safety and security. Brigham McCown joins us today. Brigham, thank you so much for being with us today.
Absolutely. Good afternoon. Pleasure to be with you.
Brigham, we are going to get onto the roads, but we do have the breaking news that is happening right now in the Ukraine, and I understand that you have some aviation experience, and you certainly flew planes in the military. Just brief us quickly on your experience.
Sure, absolutely. So, Ed, thanks again for having me on the show. I have about 30 years of naval aviator and Navy experience, and part of that time was flying in Desert Storm. I've flown helicopters and airplanes and served on major staffs coordinating aviation policy and defense of U.S. airspace and participating in numerous conflicts. So, have that background, and also senior executive U.S. Department of Transportation.
So let's look at what happened here. We're talking about an aircraft, a Boeing 777, that was at approximately 32,000 feet. We have seen some of the pictures from the site, and it is complete devastation. There are pieces over a wide debris field here, and there are reports, again, they're very conflicting at this point, that it may or may not have been a ground-to-air missile here. Just judging a little bit from what we've heard here, 33,000 feet, and knowing the missiles that are currently used in this type of warfare and in these type of instances, is that something that makes sense to you, that it could be shot down?
The aircraft can be shot down by a surface-to-air missile. However, that being said, when we're speaking about the Ukrainian conflict, the Ukrainian separatists do have the ability to engage aircraft and helicopters, but only from a lower altitude. The shoulder-fired surface-to-air missiles have a missile envelope that does not exceed 10,000 feet. So in order to shoot down something at altitude, it would have to come from a radar-controlled, much more sophisticated surface-to-air missile battery.
If we were looking again at a missile that struck the plane, would that not indicate that the plane may come down in larger pieces instead of the smaller pieces that we're seeing? Because again, I'm not a technician here, I just play one on TV, but some of the experience that I've seen in many of this, if there was some sort of an explosion or some sort of a catastrophic failure of the aircraft, that may also then add to what may be pieces, smaller pieces instead of larger chunks coming out of the sky.
And that's very good insight, and it all depends on the crucial question of whether or not there was a direct hit or whether there was a glancing blow from a surface-to-air missile. So a direct hit could have caused catastrophic failure. You would expect to see the fuselage or the engines come apart in much more graphic type of situation. Keep in mind that on a 777, a lot of gasoline, jet fuel in the wings. However, a minor hit or a glancing blow could have struck certain aspects of the aircraft that would have made it uncontrollable. This is a fly-by-wire aircraft. It is, it's a very safe airplane. It's been a big triumph for Boeing. They're major wide body since the 747, but the way that it's controlled If certain aspects are damaged, then the plane becomes uncontrollable, yet appears to remain intact until crash.
And the one thing that people have not really talked about much, this is Malaysia Airlines, and this is the same airline with the aircraft that is still missing over the Indian Ocean. So we have two aircrafts from the very same company that are downed under very mysterious circumstances. So it would lead one to wild speculation. But again, we simply do not have any facts at this point, so we're simply not going to sit here and speculate. But I want to thank you, first of all, as we get into the few minutes we have left here to talk about why we had you on, to at least give us some of that experience, because this is going to be a story that we need to follow all day long. Let me turn us now to the Highway Trust Fund here. As I mentioned at the top of the show, the infrastructure in America is completely breaking down. Roads everywhere are just coming apart in pieces. So what is it sitting here right now with the Highway Trust Fund? Why is it so important that this is refunded, and so important that we get more money into this, right away, if yesterday, if not even sooner?
Well, the Highway Trust Fund is something, as the President pointed out in the clip that you've mentioned, helps fund our infrastructure projects. There's several issues here at play, and nothing is ever as simple as it seems in Washington, D.C. It's a gorgeous day here in Washington, but it's a lot more complex than that. Number one, Highway Trust Fund has been around for a long time. It was originally designed to build the Eisenhower interstate system. That system's been built, yet we keep funding the road projects the same way we always have. States get about 95 cents on the dollar back from what they put into it. What they put into it is based on roughly an 18.5 cents per gallon gas tax that has not been adjusted since the 90s. The system is outdated. It's been broken for a long period of time. But the roads haven't fallen apart overnight. And we need more capital infused into the roadways. The breakdown is who's going to pay for it and how. And frankly, 6 years into the President's administration, this is hardly a crisis overnight in the making.
But let's look at the tax issue here, which you brought up, 18.4 cents per gallon gas tax. This seems to me, and we've had a lot of discussions with this from our automobile experts over the last couple of months here, that it has to come from here. The only way to really start pumping money into this is Americans are going to pay more gas tax. You said things are not as simple as that. Is it as simple as we're going to see greater taxes on gasoline?
We have to fund the highway system, and obviously concrete roads, bridges cost a lot more today than they did in the 1990s. The states also levy a per gallon gas tax. In most cases, that far exceeds what the feds get at 18.4 cents. The 18.4, though, has been diverted to pay for a lot of other issues. I used to be the general counsel of the trucking agency at DOT. They get almost $500 million a year, and a lot of that comes from the Highway Trust Fund to talk about commercial motor vehicle safety. We're diverting funds to pay for high-speed rail. We've got to look at funding those programs, but we can't be robbing the fund that is made to pay for roads and bridges, number one. Number two, the debate in Washington centers around users versus who should pay, and that's been one of where the breakdowns have occurred, and that's the tolling versus the free roads. Americans expect roads. They expect to be able to drive on them. Like most of us don't like tolls, and that's where it's all gotten bogged down in policy, Ed.
We only have 12 legislative days left until Congress takes a month-long recess here. The trust fund runs out of money on August 1st. Are we looking at another government shutdown here, something serious?
You know, I don't think so, because although the politicians can't agree on how to fund this, they've done what politicians in Congress do a lot of times. They want to kick the can further down the road. The House has a proposal to plus up the Highway Trust Fund by $10 billion by taking money out of the general fund to kind of float it along. Senate's expected to agree to that proposal, but that will only give us, through the end of the year. These issues and questions on how to fund our priority programs, have been undecided for 10 years. And unlike a lot of partisan issues, those roads and bridges really aren't a Democratic or a Republican issue. It's a local issue, and it's something we all need to get behind.
I got about 60 seconds left. I did want to get your opinion on this. The Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee has a vote on the Keystone Pipeline this week. How big is this vote?
I think it's going to be a pretty large vote because there are a number of very vulnerable Senate Democrats on the conservative side that are pro-energy. Mary Landrieu is one in particular. They would like to see Keystone make it through. It has become the poster child for the off-oil agenda and the environmental movement. It is, frankly, something that from a safety perspective should be approved, and we'll see what happens.
Would you say that it's more, there are some who say that it is a symbolic vote coming up this week. You think it's more than symbolic?
I think it's largely a symbolic vote, but if I were the president, I think I would rather have Congress take it out of his hands, because the president is stuck in the middle between the unions on one side, who want to build Keystone, and the environmental movement on the other, that is opposing all new oil and gas infrastructure projects.
A president stuck in the middle. I don't think we've ever seen that before in any administration in our lifetimes. I'm absolutely stunned to hear you say that. Brigham McCown, thank you so much for joining us again. Thank you so much for your insight into what may or may not be happening, and certainly the story that we're following right now in the Ukraine. Again, I thank you, and let's please do it again.
Ed, thanks so much for having me on the show. Appreciate
Pleasure.
it.
Brigham, have a great day. Next up, the backbiting battle that is threatening to engulf the Republican Party, and why there is real concern at a few major amusement parks over the safety of your children. It's coming up right here on MidPoint, where every day, without fail, we question everything.